Hi, and welcome back to Stretching the Canine Athlete Part 2. I'm going to split these two, the questions and then the video, into two separate videos. So I'm first going to deal with the questions or address the questions. Um, and certainly if some of the questions weren't addressed, just you can shoot me an email and I'll try to get them taken care of for you. So this is a question that I hear quite often about stretching before and after class. And sometimes it happens you may do the perfect warm up and you're all ready, and then you have to wait, or you're sitting, or there, whatever happens, you just need to can't do your activity. And this may be whether you're competing or if you're taking your dog for a hike and something happens that just kind of throws you for a loop. So definitely do your warm up as planned, but then keep your dog moving. So we don't want to put the dog back into the crate. Definitely walk around. So you can do sit to stands, figure eights, you could do paws up. Just keep them moving so the blood flow isn't settling. You don't want to put them back in that crate or run. And then definitely if you have a second, a third, or more runs in agility or any other events in flyball or obedience, you will need to completely warm up again. The warm up portion of the walk may be less, so you may not have to walk them as much, but you still have to do the warm up. So this is just a part of it. So every time you go out with your dog, you're going to need to do that. When I know this was a great question, and is there a huge change in range of motion or mobility during a warm up? And no, there's not going to be a significant increase in range of motion where it's going to cause an issue. So for example, if your dog's hip, if you're stretching it, giving it a little bit of motion, you're only going to increase the flexibility by a couple degrees, not enough to throw their balance off or their motion or their jumping style. So that will not become an issue. With our warm-up, the goal is blood flow and also to prepare the dog's body for exercise and activity. So whatever you're about to do. So don't worry about having a detrimental effect. And using things like hot packs or similar items will not increase the blood flow or the range of motion enough to cause injuries. So of course, if you think about if a person was in a hot tub for a prolonged period of time and you really slowed things down. But we're not doing that with the warm-up portion of our stretching. We're just increasing the blood flow a bit. So we're not having that sauna or hot tub effect. Again, the goal of the warm-up is to prepare the dog for activity. So daily stretching should be performed on a regular basis. And this is not meant to be an hour out of every day. This could be 5 minutes each day. If your dog has had an injury, static stretching should be performed daily and of course after a proper warm-up. So for example, if your dog has had an iliopsoas issue, you may want to perform those stretches both dynamically and statically. It's much easier to perform the dynamic stretching on a regular basis. So asking for the dog's paws up or bending down is easier to perform. So yes, stretching needs to be done on a regular basis. Definitely, if your dog has had an injury, you want to focus on that static stretching after a proper warm-up. So a question about back on track products, and I put some links in here. I'm just looking at some clinical studies. Most of the clinical studies have been done with horses, but also there's information about their products. Before an event, the wearing the jackets or the braces, if you wear a hock or a carpal brace, you have not if your dog wears one. Ideally, you want to keep it on 1 to 3 hours ahead of the event. That's the recommendation from the company, and also if you just look at it clinically, how it's going to warm up the muscles. During the part of the warm up, you could absolutely have the dog wear the jacket. Um, as the dog starts to become warm, if they're panting or if they're becoming uncomfortable, take it off. And also when the movements are starting to get very dynamic, so if you're doing some jumping with the dog, then I would take it off also. The Assisi loop. So, does this really work? And I truly believe this works. I am very skeptical about things, and I've been involved with using the Assisi loops for probably about 4, maybe 5 years now. I notice a huge difference with my clients, and I use it on my own dogs and I use it on myself. Um, Here again, I gave you some links for some research. The CC loop is targeted pulse electromagnetic field therapy. So it is increasing blood flow, it is decreasing inflammation, it has a healing effect. So I wrote a chapter in a book, which I will give you the link in the discussion, on enhancing performance using the Assisi loop, and also with laser photobiomodulation. So this is something that you can use before and after activity. It will increase blood flow. The dogs and people do not feel anything with this, so it's not going to amp them up or charge them up or anything like that. The back on track versus the Assisi loop. In a perfect world, I really like both. I think they are doing two different things. The back on track is really an all over sort of thing, so it's covering more surface area. When you get, you'll just cover more. The same thing if you're targeting with either the carpal wraps or the hock wraps. The CC loop, as I mentioned, may assist with performance enhancement. We know through the blood flow, the reduction in inflammation, and also pain. So, you have the benefits of both here. And the Back on Track, you could purchase that through Back on Track or any authorized dealers. The Assisi loop has to be through either your veterinarian or your rehab practitioner. We have them in our clinic, so if anyone is ever interested, you can just contact me, and we can talk about that. The Assisi loop is covered by most veterinarian insurance companies, which is lovely. The supradigital flexor tendon. So this is a common injury, whether it is surgical or non-surgical, really working on those toes. And after an injury or after surgery, I really like to encourage the dog to stretch over surfaces. This is actually a dog that had a supradigital flexor tendon repair, and we're using laser at the same time while we're stretching her paws out over the nubby pods. Other things are walking in sand, snow, or mud. I know mud doesn't sound too sexy, but it's a great way to stretch out there. Also, before looking at those toes and this is a Great Dane paw. You can see how huge his toes are. If the dogs have had issues to their toes or about to run on any surfaces like sand or dirt, it's great to do an extension stretch, such as in the first picture, and then a flexion stretch, sticking with holding again for 15 seconds and repeating up to 3 times. Staying in the planes of movement. And when we talk about the planes of movement, we have the sagittal plane, the coronal plane, and the transverse plane. I gave you a demonstration of people versus dogs. And most of the time we're moving in these planes, but we definitely have a little bit of a variation. So a question came up, do you have to stay in the planes of movement? And yes and no. Certainly we don't all move exactly in a plane of movement. There is some deviation with regard to internal, external rotation, AB and adduction. So yes, we want to stay in the plane of movement. Um, Dogs, I will always remember my father saying this to me, that dogs move with their legs going backward and forward, not so much out to the side. And certainly coming too much into abduction is often bad. Um, Keep remembering we don't want to cause pain and discomfort. Is it part of the natural movement? So sometimes I'll be extending a dog's shoulder and I'll be moving straight out, but there's a little bit of sideways movement. As long as it's not causing any discomfort, that's fine. So it's not exact. Dogs are not boxes, so you will have a little deviation there. Alternatives to not lying down and stretching. And certainly there are times where your dog is just not going to relax, and that is fine. You may also not want to get down on a dirty gym floor or barn floor, anything like that. So if we want to stretch, do some dynamic stretching for hip and knee flexion, easy. Have a dog hold a sit. So while they're sitting and holding for about 15 seconds, we're getting a nice stretch and moving the hip and the knee into flexion and the hock. So I'm just showing a picture, making it a little bit more dynamic of the dog sitting on a disc. So we're getting a little bit of workout too. So I'll have the dog hold the position for 15 seconds and then repeat 3 times. And this was, slide should have been a little bit before, but when we look at moving the dog into shoulder extension, so the picture on the left is moving into shoulder extension. The picture on the right is coming way out into abduction. And this was a picture I found on the internet. I'm not quite sure why the dog's shoulder was moving out this far, unless the dog had a medial shoulder issue and had all that flexibility. So especially with sporting dogs and the high rise of shoulder instability, we really want to try to avoid stretching into this motion. Stretching the shoulders. Here's a cute little French bulldog puppy doing chewing on it's actually our dentist dog, and I was laughing. I said this is perfect to show shoulder flexion and elbow flexion. So we would stretch into a bow for shoulder extension with a dog. To do the opposite, we'll ask the dog to go down and hold for 15 seconds. This puts the shoulder and the elbow into shoulder flexion. And we're going to do this again 3 times. It's different than having the dog just stay down. So the difference is going to be we're going to hold for 15 seconds, ask the dog to come up, and repeat it 3 times. The quadricep stretch. So another question came up. This is about, is it safe to do with patella tendonitis? And yes, it is. You just want to make sure you're respecting the knee. Definitely, if you're feeling resistance, if the dog is experiencing pain, back off. So you want to be careful. This is another motion you want to keep in. You don't want to abduct or bring that hip out because we will not be getting the quadricep stretch. So again, just bend that knee first and then bring the hip back slowly. So, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And I will, in the next video clip, review your videos. And overall, I think everyone did a really great job. A lot of it is hand placement and learning where to put your hands and what feels normal to you. So that some of that comes with practice. Definitely, if you want more, we'll be doing a lot of that in the canine conditioning class starting in December.